Let's talk about when you should consider selling your rental properties. Now, I understand there's some people who are in the camp where they're like, I'm never going to sell anything. I'm not going to talk to you if you are not open to change your mind here. But for the people who say, hey, at some point I may want to sell some of my rentals for a variety of reasons, this video is for you. All right. So the first one, well, let's just get out of the way that it's going to depend on your goals and where you're at in your investing career. Those things are going to greatly change, really when you should sell your rentals. Um, and also it's going to matter like what you value. Um, those are all going to be things to consider. So I'm going to give you some thoughts that should go into really the whole picture when you are thinking of selling a rental. So the first one is, why are you selling? Now, this is really important because you shouldn't just sell for no reason, right? Because selling takes time, costs money, and it should be done with intention. I'm a big fan of doing things by design, not by default. So, on the other hand, again, selling isn't a bad thing. So, to those of you who are like, oh, I'll never sell, know that there is a time where some properties you've got to kind of cull your portfolio and say, hey, these are the ones that aren't performing as planned. And maybe it's for those reasons, right? Um, again, do it with intention. It reminds me of a story though, as well. In New Orleans, that's where I'm from. One time I was at a cigar lounge. I don't really go to those. And anyway, there was a hedge fund manager that was he had made a statement, and it's something that stood out to me. He said, "Oh, you real estate people, you never know when to get off the roller coaster." I think that was an interesting statement. Now, do I want to encourage you to try to time the market? Hell no. As the good old adage says, it's not timing the market that matters, it's time in the market. So don't try to be the fool that tries to time the market, right? And so there is benefit. So many investors miss out on a lot of the benefits that come with time. So again, when you sell, it should be with intention. And this is where, again, a lot of flippers miss out on some of the benefits that come with time, wholesalers, things like that. So one of the first things you should consider when selling a rental is, why are you doing it? What's your intention driving behind it? Number two, your underlying financing should impact your decision. Now, why do I say that? Now, some people are being forced to sell because maybe they have a balloon payment, maybe they have an adjustable rate on their mortgage coming up, maybe they have some type of term within their mortgage that is forcing them to sell. But so that's on the negative side. So on the positive side, you've got good terms such as, the safe and feasible long-term, low interest, long-term fixed debt. Now, I wouldn't say subject to is safe and feasible, even though it's low interest and it's fixed debt. It is not safe and feasible because of the nature of the debt. But at the same time, if you have other debt, let's just say seller financing debt that's low interest, long term, you should think twice before selling that. Or if you're a more hyper creative investor, there's some other things you can do with that debt, such as substituting the collateral or something like that. And so it's important to understand, what if you have 0% interest on a deal? I mean, I have one right now. I don't want to own the property, but I have 0% interest on it. So, as a more advanced creative investor, I am looking at what I want to do with that. Do I have some additional options? I do, and I want to make sure that I am considering those when I am considering selling that specific property. Ultimately, um, you also want to be mindful if your financing has a prepayment penalty. That should be a part of your decision when deciding if you're going to sell it. If you're like, Courtney, I don't know, well, go check your actual loan terms. I'm talking the 20-page, you know, loan paperwork that you have from your closing that dictates all the different terms to the deal. And so, if you've got a prepayment penalty, would that be something you should know about? Hell yeah, you should know how much it is, and it should be a part of your decision. Just because you have a prepayment penalty doesn't mean you shouldn't sell. It just should be, you should either build that in, or you should just be aware that exists. So the third thing I want you to consider when considering selling one of your rentals is that what would you do next? What are you going to do with the proceeds of the sale? Again, this goes back to kind of the first one. What's your intentions? Some of you may say, Courtney, I already have my intention set. I am going to do a 1031 exchange into another property. For those who aren't aware, 1031 exchanges are a tax deferment strategy. When you sell a rental property and you've got a major tax bill tied to that sale, then what you can do is a 1031 exchange. It will cost you some money to do this transaction, but basically instead of you coming into that money for you, taking hold of the money from the sale, it basically gets put with a third party. And then you've got a short timeline where you have to buy another like kind property. There's some caveats to it, but ultimately, you then have a different rental property. It's an opportunity for you to trade up or, trade your rental property. And that 1031 exchange can bring you some benefits. Now, again, you should do that by design. That 1031 exchange costs money and it puts you on a timeline and it forces you to own real estate on the back end for the most part. Another thing is, what do you value? How are you going to replace the benefits you're giving up? For example, the cash flow, the tax benefits, the appreciation, the amortization. That's where it's important. If you're going to sell, acknowledge what benefits you're giving up. And then are you planning to replace them? Again, where are you going to put that money? Are you going to reinvest it? This is just more of a wise decision with your money. And because look, I understand sometimes people sell their rentals out of an emotional decision because of what's going on in the market, a bad tenant experience, something like that. But again, I want you to come back to some sound investing principles. So that's the third thing I want you to consider is, what are your next steps if you do sell this property? And then the fourth one, and I think this is absolutely one of the number one things I consider when selling a property is the tax ramifications. Anytime you sell real estate, you should always think, what are my tax ramifications? And now I'm talking income tax. I'm talking Uncle Sam IRS taxes. There's generally two that you need to be mindful of. The first one is what's called long-term capital gains. That's the fancy word for basically, this really applies if you've basically bought it for a low price and it's been a long time. If it's appreciated, if it's gone up in value, especially if it's gone up in value a lot, you should be mindful because you could have a very big long-term capital gains hit. The second thing that matters when selling a rental property is what's called depreciation recapture. Depreciation is the tax benefit whenever you own a rental property. But Uncle Sam says, hey, I gave you that benefit when you owned it, but now that you're selling it, I'm going to make it a consequence now. And especially if you did an advanced tax strategy like cost segregation or bonus depreciation, you should absolutely talk to your CPA. Depending on where your tax bracket is, you could owe up to 30 to 50% of what you're supposed to make on this deal. That's a big freaking deal. Now, because imagine if you sold a property and you thought you were going to walk away with 100, but instead you walked away with, 50 or 60. Would that influence your decision? It should, right? It should. Now, with that being said, everyone's situation is different. Different people value different things. Some people are more aggressive. Some people are more conservative. Some people, maybe this is a rental you haven't owned for very long. All those different things come into play, but these are some things you should consider when considering selling your rentals. And look, at the end of the day, you've got to be able to say, I chose this. I made the best informed decision that I can, because at the end of the day, there's plenty of properties that I sold that are now worth double, different things like that. But hey, if you make the best decision with the information that you have today, that's all that you can do. Guys, this is another video. I'm doing one video a day for the first 100 days of 2025. Appreciate you subscribing, following along, and chatting with me in the comments. Have a great day.